Morena tātou, mai hara mai ki te rohe tino a tāka o te rotorua nui a Kahumata Momoe. In regards to Deputy Mayor Kaifong hosting us here at Rotorua. And I believe that Mayor Tapsell has returned part-time. Yes. So maybe at the next KIG meeting we can play with the baby then. She can join us. Welcome everybody. Mai hara mai to the Bay of Plenty Civil Defence Emergency Management Group Joint Committee. It's a long one. We declare our meeting open today, Friday, the 30th of June, 2023, here at 10 a.m. I might invite, please, Stacey Tahiri from our Emergency Management Bay Plenty Group. Stacey, can I invite you, please, to whakahua, can open our meeting with Kia, please.
Tēnā koutou e ngā rangia, inga mate haere atuga, mutiki songa mate tonga te omaro, ka mihi te kāinga ki a te aroa, tēnā koutou, ki a tātou tānei kia ora, tēnā koutou, tō, me mai tātou, whakatakatau ki te uru, whakatakatau ki te taonga, cease the winds from the west, cease the winds from the south. Kia mā kene ki uta, kia mā karatara ki tai. Let the bracing breeze flow over the land, let the bracing breeze flow over the sea. E hi aki ana te atākura, let the red-tipped dawn come. E tio, e huka, e hauhu, may it come with a sharpened edge, a touch of frost, and a promise of a glorious day. Ti hei maunei.
Thank you, Stacey. Just with our meeting this morning, please, I do have a couple of reminders just at the start of our meeting. Can I remind members and staff, please, that this meeting is being recorded and that the recording will be made available on the Bay Plenty Regional Council website following our meeting. Also, a friendly reminder that all present that local government decision-making affords no protection to councillors, council officers and the public for comments made during the meetings that are subsequently challenged in a court of law and determined to be slanderous. That is a reminder. However, I'm confident that every member of our joint committee we stand here, we sit here to make the good decisions that need to be made for the protection of people with property across the Bay. Kia ora, and thank you for our opening. Karakia, our first agenda item, please, this morning is apologies. We have apologies received from Commissioner Chair Antoli. Bill Bosley also has apologies for lateness. He will be joining us today. I have Mayor Tanya Tapsell, so we have our alternate member here this morning, Deputy Mayor Sandra Kaifong, and Councillor Ron Scott, Bay Plenty Regional Council alternate. Do I have any other apologies? With those apologies, I have moved by Councillor Campbell, seconded by Deputy Mayor Kaifong. All those in favour, please signal aye. Aye. Those against, the item is carried. And can I just mention that we have joining us on Zoom this morning, alternate member Deputy Mayor Leslie Emick and Paula Day from Runanga City Council. We also have His Worship David Moore of Portiki joining us via Zoom. Do we have time set aside in our agenda for public forum? And we have nobody here for public forum. Just a reminder to those who do view the meeting that public forum is set aside if anyone would like to address the joint committee. Moving on, please, to agenda item number 3, items not on the agenda. Noting that the following report has been added to the agenda, sent under a separate cover. Bay Plenty Civil Defence Emergency Management Group Local Recovery Manager Amendments. This report will be covered at the end of the agenda in item 7.9. Can I have a move this agenda moved by the Deputy Chair, His Worship Mayor Daniel? Do I have a second? Deputy Mayor Kaifong. All those in favour, please signal aye. As against, the item is carried. Agenda item number 4, order of business. There is no change to the order of business with our agenda this morning. We've just accepted the appointment of the recovery manager, which has been added as agenda item 7.9. Moving on, please, to agenda item 5, declarations of conflict of interest. Do I have any declarations with regards to this agenda this morning? If there are none, we will move on, please, to agenda item number 6, 6.1, Bay Plenty Civil Affairs Emergency Management Group Joint Committee Minutes held way back on the 31st of March 2023, page 7. Page 7 of our agenda, I have mover and Deputy Mayor Kaifang. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by His Worship, Medina. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against? The minutes are carried. Okay, moving on, please, to agenda item number 7. 7.1, Bay Plenty Second Group Plan 2023 to 28 approval for public consultation starting in the agenda at page 17. And can I please at 10:07 welcome Commissioner Bosley and Linda who will join us this morning. Page graphics. We're just at agenda item 7.1.
Thank you.
Page 17 of our agenda. We're moving into the group plan 2023 to 28. And Acting Director Mark Crowe and Principal Advisor Cara Gordon, you're in their hands. Thank you, Cara.
Morning, Taco. First, I'd like to thank you all again for your engagement in our workshop 2 weeks ago. It was only 2 weeks ago. It does feel much longer. And the document that Stace Tahi is currently handing out are the notes from that workshop, just for context for you all. We won't go through those notes in detail, but I did want you to all have them in front of you. So we revised the group plan following that workshop, and we took your lead from the conversations that we had on the day. We heard very clearly that you wanted this group plan to be community-centric and community-focused, and you wanted to make sure that came through crystal clear in the document. So that's where we've concentrated our changes. As you'll see, as you'll see, we've made significant changes to the language in the plan, as well as within our conditions that have been made. So we've shifted that tone from what was a very formal, structured tone of the Bay of Plenty Second Group will and the Bay of Plenty community into something that more reflects who we are as a region, we will, and our communities and the like. And we've also removed some of that more scientific structured formal language to make it a more accessible document. As part of that, we've really wanted to tell our story. And so you'll see some additions through the document that put that forward. It's everything from the emergency timeline that Deputy Mayor recommended through to these pop-up stories that talk through things like our experiences during Rena, the Edgecombe earthquake, Cyclone Gabrielle, that are really there to reflect what we faced, but illustrate how we and our partners have worked together and the progress and the lessons that have been learned through that process. So it really reflected that in the group plan. As you'll see, the format of the plan hasn't changed substantially, the graphics have yet to come. So that's where you'll see more of that coming up with the tone coming through that graphics process. We were actually able to reflect in a bit more accessible way what this plan means from a really look and feel perspective. That group is intended to occur alongside our community consultation so that our community can, the text and then we can work with our graphics team all like their reasonably detailed process. These things take time, I've discovered, in order to ensure that we can really get that look and feel you're looking for. You'll also see through this process that we've maintained the strategic role of this document, and what that practically means is that as your feedback came in, we separated it into essentially two different camps. Some of it was incorporated directly into the document from a content perspective. For example, and I'll run through this in a bit more detail soon, a new recovery objective that more accurately reflects the community role and the work we want to do with communities recovery, but also other pieces that have been put into other documents, plans and work programs. So it's, for example, the call for elected member media training, ensuring that's incorporated into our training plan rather than specifically in the document. I will touch on how that incorporates through. We also, very briefly go through raised mission, as per comments around bringing some of that extra tone down. You'll see those changes in there as well. But what I'd like to very briefly do is run through the 4 I's of emergency management, talk through the key themes that came out of the workshop and how we've incorporated those into this document. So from a reduction perspective, there were 2 key components. So the first was around that community knowledge and understanding, a real message around how we provide careful and balanced articulation of risk to our communities, and that's what you're seeing in Objective 1, and also how we talk about mitigation possibilities, what can and can't be mitigated, and that's been incorporated into a section around where we want to be around ensuring our communities are provided with that information. You also spoke about the support for a joint committee and advocate for risk reduction and risk reduction policy, and you'll see that in Objective 2 there. So this reflects the main mechanism for risk reduction is within your own local authority plans, but also recognises this joint committee has the ability to choose to advocate as a collective for the risk reduction work that we would like to see done. From a readiness perspective, these conversations really focus on how we deliver these strategic objectives. There was a number of areas, so for example, that media training I spoke to earlier, and broader training and engagement exercise for elected officials, which really comes in under Objective 2 around the whole set of group as the set of group, growing capability and maintaining that throughout the emergency, advancing emergency. And Mark will talk about more to that media training opportunity and his director's update later on and how we're looking to progress that with you. It was also around expanding the knowledge and skills of our communities and businesses, and a number of really specific pieces of feedback. So, for example, response staff being properly trained and qualified, contingency training, so contingency planning for staff unavailability in an emergency, effective engagement with partner agencies, effective communications, and volunteer management. A lot of this has all been incorporated and will be incorporated into our agency and local authority plans. So for example, our training plan, development response coordination plan, and feedback into councils about where you're looking for them to target work programs, and that's volunteer management for their key component of that. We also took on your feedback that this gave the impression we were starting from scratch previously, and we needed to kind of jump from nothing, as we reframed the section to make sure it's really clear that we're looking to grow and maintain our capability and capacity rather than building from low base, which as we know, we aren't, we're building from the unfortunate amount of experience. From a response perspective, this was reasonably similar in terms of the feedback that was received and really focused on reflecting the lessons and experiences that we learned with APT. And this has occurred both through our stories components that we've fed and read through the document that we mentioned earlier, as well as strengthening this section as well to reflect the experience that we do have as a group, unfortunately, that our communities do have. It was also around recognising that role of elected officials and response as well, and you'll see that noted in that Objective 1. The conversation also focused on the importance of Objective 2 there, around that being that trusted and accessible source of information for communities, and that work that Lisa has been doing around ensuring that we are that trusted and accessible source. And last, but as per our conversation, certainly not least, was recovery. So this was probably the most in-depth conversation that we had in the workshop. So the first thing we've done in terms of our changes in this section is the addition of objective 1. You pointed out correctly so that we do have a community-centric objective in recovery, which is absolutely good as much ours, as we've included that in there to make sure it's central to what we're doing as our primary objective in the recovery space. We also took on feedback around the importance of recovery funding and have added some sections, both of the expenditure section and we want to make section around ensuring that we have funding arrangements in place. We're working with national agencies in advance to ensure those funding arrangements can be established before recovery requires them. And we also made sure to build that section from a lessons learned. Once again, we've got a lot of experience in response, but we've got a lot of experience in pain recovery. And so it's about ensuring that we reflected that within the section and really talked to what we know and what we've experienced as a over the past few decades, unfortunately. So those are, that is a high-level summary of the changes that we made. As discussed previously, our intention is to seek your approval of public consultation here and allow us to go through that process and then bring us back to the committee 2 more times following that, once for ministerial authorisation of the publication. So this is the start of the journey. I hope we've managed to reflect the changes you were hoping for in this draft plan. And thank you again for your participation in that workshop. That was amazingly useful.
Thank you for your presentation, Principal Advisor Gordon. Any comments, questions or points of clarification from committee members? We thank you for reflecting our lessons here in the day, as we should.
Thank you, Nathan. Carl, I just wanted to just check with some earlier comments that I made about the training for elected members. I think in the readiness section, and that was taken into account at the hearing in the draft consultation.
So I'll just do microphone. So we've got it as a high level thing in that document, but I'm more than happy to add a very specific item in there if that's what you would like before we send it to public consultation.
So my thought was on page 50, where it says, where do you want to be in 5 years' time? The 4th bullet point down, I would like it changed to CDM, elected members and support staff understand, are prepared for, and are qualified for the role, etc.
You have to make that change before it goes to public consultation.
Thank you. Any other questions for us? Commissioner Mosley.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted clarification regarding the monitoring and evaluation. It's obviously throughout the document talks about where we want to be in 5 years' time. So, and then there's a reference at the end to the reporting, forming the annual report. But do I take it reporting against the achievements of those we want to be in 5 years will be through the quarterly reporting on the annual plan? Just wanted to clarify that process.
Absolutely. So there's 2 mechanisms for reporting. The first is through your local authority long-term plans, as you usually receive that reporting mechanism, because part of the group plans delivery is through those local council mechanisms. So that's your standard process, and outside of that, yes, absolutely, through our standard reporting mechanisms, in forums such as this, we will ensure that you are updated on the progress towards the annual plan, and each of those annual plans contributes towards the group plan.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from committee members? I will just check with our Zoom participants also.
Nothing from me.
Thank you, Your Worship. Morena, Your Worship.
No, I'm having trouble hearing, and I didn't bring up the presentation on a different screen, so just was difficult to hear. But I did like what I saw initially about the different case studies that were there. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Amick. We do appreciate the staff taking the time to go through and reflect our learnings from our Bay of Plenty experiences. They've been incredibly helpful, and as was raised by you, Deputy Mayor Amick. Thank you. So I'll turn our attention please back to page 18. We have 3 recommendations for committee members. I'll take recommendation 1 and 2 first, and then we will address recommendation 3 following that. Number 1, the report is received. And number 2, that the draft Bay of Plenty Set-in Group Plan 2023-28 for public consultation is approved. Do I have a mover for recommendations 1 and 2, please? Commissioner Bosley, seconded by His Worship Daniel. All those in favour, please signal aye. Aye. Those against, recommendation 1 and 2 are carried. Moving on to recommendation 3, nominates at least 3 representatives from the Joint Committee to hear submissions on behalf of the Bay of Plenty Set-in Group. Do I call for nominations, please? As Worship Daniel.
I'd like to nominate Mayor Chineri and as Deputy Mayor Sandra Kaifong.
As 2 of the 3 group members, Worship, we have nomination for Chair and for Deputy Kaifong as 2 of the 3 nominees. Do I have a seconder for the nomination? Seconded by Councillor Campbell. The 2 nominations. I might actually
can I nominate Mayor Daniel as the Deputy Chair as the 3rd representative?
As the 3rd representative, we have a nomination for His Worship Daniel, seconded by Commissioner Bosley. We have a nomination for the Chair.
Unless Deputy Mayor Amick was also interested, I'm happy to stand aside.
Yes, if people think that would be, I could add some more contribution to that, happy to, but otherwise, just as happy for what's been proposed.
Can I suggest, Deputy Mayor Kaifong, we do have nominations for 3 members, and with respect, Deputy Mayor Amick, we do have an entire regional coverage in terms of the current nominations across Rotorua, the Western Bay and the Eastern Bay. If you're happy with that, Deputy Mayor Amick, we have nominations of 3 current members. All those in favour, please signal aye.
Aye.
Those against? Nominations are carried. Did we catch that, Miranda? It was done in a couple of steps, didn't it? The item is carried. Thank you. Moving on, please, to agenda item 7.
Can I just confirm the second recommendation is the one, first one, which was with the BF who wanted to improve the draft plan with any communications training for elected members.
Right. That moved pretty quick, so we'll just return, please, back group joint committee members to recommendation 1 and 2. Our mover for recommendation 1 and 2 was Commissioner Bosley, for 1 and 2 together, and then we had 2 separate nominations with 2 movers and 2 seconders for recommendation 3. Great, thank you so much, Miranda, for taking care of us. The item is carried. Moving on, please, to item 7.2, Bay of Plenty Civil Defence and Emergency Management Annual Plan, 23 to 24 here. And we invite our Kaifaka Haidari, our Senior Advisor for Māori Planning Space, Tahiti. We are in your hands. Thank you.
So I'll take the report as read, but what I would like to talk to is just a couple of points around the plan itself. So this annual plan has been designed in a way where we are currently operating across two group plans, essentially. So that would be the 2018-23 group plan and the 23-28. And so therefore the development in this space has had to strike that balance between reflecting the yield of the current group plan and moving into the new group plan once we've gone through our process and eventually we can do that and just push them along our very way. So that has led to a few changes within the current looks and feel of the plan, which will be reflected in the next annual plan. And those things obviously trying to bring us in line and align us to what it looks like. So the reformatting pieces around there are looking at the 5 work streams of reduction, readiness, response, recovery, plus the monitoring and evaluation piece that you see within the group plan. The change there was made to allow for better alignment within those activities and for that plan and to improve sort of the monitoring process and how we go forward in that. And so the annual plan that you will see now, and hopefully endorsed for us going forward, will again look different next year when we are working under the one plan. And through the chair,
Kai Arahimare, Tahiri, do we have any comments, questions or points of clarification from committee members? Thank you for that, Stacey. Just with regards to the annual plan, given that it is 23 to 24, there are a lot of bilingual terms that have been introduced in the annual plan. There's an opportunity with the group plan for consistency to carry those over, so we have the same whakaro and the intent carried through. It's just an observation perhaps that we can share there across plans.
Through the chair, I agree completely, and that is definitely something that we'll be looking at once we've completed our the consultation process. What we'll do is we'll take that into graphics and translation. So one thing that we do steer away from within the council and within the organisation is how we do those translations. So that's why I heard.
Thank you for that. If there are no questions, committee members, on page 66 of our agenda.
Excuse me, Madam Chair.
Deputy Mayor Amick.
Thank you, and thanks, Steve, for sending the annual report. Probably the only question I had was on the budget, and I just wondering whether a qualifying statement, because it comes out of the regional targeted rate, whether a qualifying statement about the importance of resilience with infrastructure and civil defence and all of those things there might, because it's a public document, might read a little bit easier for the general public.
Through the chair, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I can definitely have a look at that and have a sit with the director and cordial with that and get back to you with an answer unless Mark you'd like to talk to that.
All right, thanks. It might not be appropriate. People might not even worry about it, but I know when we have it in our TLAs, people kind of question any sort of change in costs and budget. Thanks.
Through the chair, and thank you for the question. There's probably 2 points for me in that regard. One is there are some confirmed budget figures to be inserted into this document, which I think we'll be able to do the next couple of days. And Stacey and I can certainly go away and have a reflection on your comments there and see what we can weave in. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Amick. If there are no further questions, I'll just look at my Zoom participants. We've got no hands up. Thank you. On page 66 of our agenda, We have recommendations that the Bay of Plenty Civil Defence Emergency Management Group Joint Committee, 1, receives the report, Bay of Plenty Civil Defence Emergency Management Annual Plan for 23-24, and 2, was the insertion of that additional information. Deputy Mayor Amick approves the Bay of Plenty Civil Defence Emergency Management Annual Plan for 23-24. Do I have a mover? Wonderful vote. Councillor Campbell, seconded by Deputy Mayor Kai Whang. Those in favour, please signal aye.
Aye.
Those against, the item is carried. Thank you. Thank you, Stace. Moving on, please, to agenda item 7.3 on page 91 of our agenda. Changes to the Bay of Plenty Civil Defence Emergency Management Group Controller on page 91.
Thank you, Chair. Through Chair, this report proposes a change to the Bay of Plenty Civil Defence Emergency Management Group Controller model. The role of the Group Controller is suggestively separated out from the Director role. This allows the Director to have a higher strategic focus on civil defence emergency management, to have the Group Controller operational focus being incorporated into the role of the MBOC Manager Operations.
Thank you, Mr. George, the Chair of the CAG, the Coordinating Executive Group. For those who aren't clear or aware, and for our public who may actually watch the meeting, that's what the CAG is the acronym for. Do I have any questions, points of clarity, comments from elected members? If there are none, on page 92 of our agenda, we have 4 recommendations to number 1, receive the report, changes to the Bay of Plenty Civil Defence Emergency Management Group Controller. Number 2, to approve the change to the appointment of Group Controller to my name as set out in the SEDM Act 2022, Section 26. 1, if anyone goes looking for it. Number 3, to approve the appointment by the Bay of Plenty Civil Defence Emergency Management Group Joint Committee of Mark Crowe, Manager of Operations as Group Controller of Bay of Plenty Civil Defence Emergency Management, as defined again when we go looking for it under Section 26 Part 1 of the SEDM Act Group of 2002. And recommendation 4 approves the rescindment of Clinton Morday, Director of Emergency Management Bay of Plenty, as Group Controller of the Bay of Plenty Civil Defence Emergency Management. Happy to take a mover for all 4 recommendations. Do I have a mover? Moved by Deputy Chair, His Worship Mayor Denia, seconded Deputy Mayor Kai Whang. All those in favour, please signal aye.
Aye.
Those against, the item is carried. Moving on, please, to agenda item 7.4 on page 95 of our agenda, the Bay of Plenty Defence Civil Defence Emergency Management Group Cyclone Gabrielle Disaster Relief Fund application round 2, and we welcome Julian Deputy Principal Advisor of Recovery to the table, and we also have a guest to your right as well. Julian, thank you. You're in your hands.
Through the Chair, I'd like to introduce Joe Minsky, the Emergency Management Rep for Western Bay of Plenty. Joe also looks after the administration fund from Western Bay's point of view, and the project management of that, and also the liaison with all the applicants that the fund is trying to. So, just very briefly, this is the second round of application. And Western Bay are the only ones who have put in a charge. We've offered it out again to all councils to see if there were any other applications specifically associated with Gabrielle, Cyclone Gabrielle. Western Bay had another charge that came through, fairly overprescribed again. And in that case, they've gone through the application, they've done their due diligence and their processes. And the report is looking at the second $100,000 being approved for the application to Western Bay. And I'll just leave it there. I would say that would close the fund in total and therefore there would be no other applications available to the fund at this point.
I thank you, Principal Advisor Liberty. Liberty, we invite you to the table if you would like to present to committee members.
Kia ora koutou. I don't actually have too much more to add from what Julian has just spoken about, but I'm happy to answer any specific questions along with Special Opinion James Tenian. I'm sure we'll also be able to answer any questions.
That's wonderful. Thank you for that, Joe. Your wish.
Thank you. I'll just make a comment for elected members around the room to understand. So I was sitting on the panel to approve the first tranche of money, and so that was $100,000. We had 20 applicants, most of whom could have easily done with 100,000 each. So I did maths on that one, and it was a fairly pitiful experience of choosing and allocating. So any further help would be most appreciated.
Thank you for that, Your Worship. Commissioner Mosley.
Not a question, but I'm happy to move the recommendations.
Thank you for that. I have removed for recommendations 1 and 2, Commissioner Mosley. If you're happy with that, we have a receipt of the report and approving the allocation of a further amount of $100,000 to the Western Bay Plenty District Council from the Bay Plenty CM Group Cyclone Gabrielle Disaster Relief Fund. Happy to move both recommendations, Commissioner? Yes. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Campbell. Those in favour, please signal aye. Aye. Those who are against, thank you, Your Worship. More in the Portuguese, I did catch that in the corner of my eye. Those who are against, if there are none, the item is carried. Thank you both for your presentation. Moving on, please, to agenda item 7.5. Members on page 105 of our agenda, Bay Plenty CM Group 2022-23 Annual Planning Dashboard as at the 25th of May 2023. So I can invite again Gaila Himaris, Tahiri, to present to the Joint Committee members. Thank you for that space.
Through the chair. Kia ora. So again, I think within the paper there, it's worked down as information, but I will cordial to this piece of work away. So currently, what we have been doing with regards to the reporting dashboards has been with our within the group has been reporting from the dashboard updates into the group office, with the group office presenting that at our quarterly meetings. With the group plan moving forward and the way we will be moving forward as a group, those reporting processes are looking to change. Whereby, as Karen mentioned, when she was talking about the group plan, with more of the outputs and focuses from specific or specific districts now being seen at the LTPs reported through the council itself, through the governance structures yourselves, and with the instruction and decision made by Key at the last meeting, that reporting cycle and process will no longer continue, and that the dashboards going forward will report on the group office outputs. So what we do is a group. Happy to take any questions, ma'am.
Thank you for that, Mr. Tahiri. Do we have any questions or comments with regards to our dashboard agenda item 7.5? Deputy Mayor Alec. I've still just got you on mute there, please, Deputy Mayor. If you can hear me, Deputy Mayor, we can't quite hear you. We might still be on mute.
My apologies. Thank you, Stace. The ambient noise is quite difficult to hear. Did you say in regards to the district councils that had all empty boxes on the dashboard, that you would be contacting the council, or you had contacted them to fill in their 60 stories and the numbers of people trained and all the rest of it? Kind of missed that, unfortunately.
Through the chair, thank you for the question. The focus on the reporting now is back up through each council in its own right. We've received a directive from KEG that we shall look at group activities as we peel them off the annual plan. The success stories we can circulate, but the direction for us has been to do so via the KEG mechanism, and then they'll feed back up through here. So the dashboard, I suppose to answer your question, is when you look at Whakatane's dashboard here, there's not a great story there at all, and I appreciate and acknowledge that, and we can do something to fill that out. We don't have a long arm to reach in and necessarily extract those stories for you today, but we certainly can do that on reflection. The idea is the mechanism we build in the future is that you should be hearing that noise up through your own sort of organisations and feeding it to the collective table. Thank you.
Is it worth having the representative members here, like myself and Mayor Victor, talk to our team about what we can do to populate those dashboards, like rather than having it happen behind the scenes and it might get missed?
Through the chair, I think there would be benefit if the representation here could speak to the 60 stories in their own agency, yes. Right,
super. Consider it done.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any other questions, points of clarity from committee members? If there are none, on page 105, we have a recommendation to receive the report dashboard as at 25th May 2023. Do I have a mover for the recommendation? His Worship Mayor Luka, seconded by Deputy Mayor Kaifong. All those in favour, please signal aye. Those against, the item is carried. Thank you, Stace. Moving on, please, to agenda item 7.6. Page 111 of our agenda, we welcome Mark Crowe, Acting Director of Emergency Management. Mark, in your hands.
Thank you, Chair. There are 5 items I'd like to cover an update this morning. The first one, and I'm very aware of, was discussed at the last joint committee, but I just wanted to bring it to everyone's attention again, as it will be quite topical. As the Whakaari trial remains set to open on the 10th of July, currently scheduled for approximately 16 weeks, and that's going to be have a high level of interest across our communities and in fact staff and organisations. I just think we'll need to remain cognizant of that. The second item is pertaining to the Emergency Management Reform Bill, which has entered the House and I believe passed its first reading. I'm not intending to go into a great deal of detail on that today, as I believe he's going to cover that off quite comprehensively in your report, so I'll leave that one with you, Lily. The annual report we haven't made available, and you may be seeking that at the end of the year through this cycle. We've pulled that out as we feel it's more accurate to reflect it on the next cycle once the financial year is actually closed out, albeit that today we can't capture the rest of the last of the detail that we need to actually reflect that for you, so we'll hold it out and you'll see that in the next cycle. The last item is, well, the last 2 items probably wind into one, and it reflects back to Mayor Denya's previous comments around the media training and the offering of that. That is something we would like to make available to members here and alternatives if required. Lisa has been delivering some media training to controllers and recovery managers, which has been very well received of late. And we would like to test, and we don't need it perhaps a show of hands, but it's something we can circulate after the meeting of a level of interest from yourselves. We can certainly pull something together in the near future, and what I'm intending to do is sit back and develop a bit of a roadmap for other elements you may want to visit as well, such as a presentation perhaps on lead agency, where our roles and responsibilities sit to lead on events versus where we would be expected to support other agencies or other agencies planning. So we'll come up with a roadmap to support you in your role here. That isn't ready for you today, but we've identified from the joint committee workshop that that would be something that would be beneficial and you would like. So we'll take that on board and take that away. And that concludes my update. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Acting Director Mr. Crowe. Are there any questions, comments, points of clarification from committee members? If there are none, can I call for a mover to receive the verbal update? Moved by Deputy Mayor Kai Whang. Do I have a seconder? Seconded His Worship Mayor Luka Whakatane. All those in favour, please signal aye.
Aye.
Those against, the item is carried. Mark. Moving on to agenda item 7.7, our update from our National Emergency Management Agency. Can we welcome the response? Bring your hands.
Kia ora mai tātou, thank you, Chair. I will take the report as read, but I do have some verbal updates. One is that, thank you, Mark, that yesterday the Emergency Management Bill did go through its first reading yesterday being the 29th of June. What this means now is that it will progress through to select committee process. It is through that process that public submissions will be called for. I don't have an indication about when public submissions will be called for, but we do anticipate that we should have some information in the next couple of weeks. A few more points. I was asked to provide an update about a media release for future of local government report. Our response to that is that NEMA is aware of the independent review that was taken. My understanding was understood that EIA will, over the coming months, work with next steps with their minister and provide some information to local authorities. That we are happy to hear your perspectives about what this might mean for you, particularly in terms of civil defence. And if you do have feedback or questions, I'm happy to take that through to our department. Thirdly, you may be aware that the Minister for Emergency Management made an announcement for a government inquiry into the severe weather responses this year. In the report that I submitted, I did talk about NEMA's after-action review, and I do want to make it clear that these are two different processes. So the government will be doing an inquiry into the response, and NEMA will also be doing an after-action review. I don't know why my kōrero today is not the best, but anyway, so the government inquiry will be doing their process, and NEMA is also doing an after-action review. And just finally, you may be aware that during the Cyclone Gabrielle, the Cyclone Gabrielle Welfare Support Grant was provided to communities. This welfare grant was so that communities, for example, Marae, community organisations were able to seek reimbursement directly via NEMA. This was set to expire this month, however it's been extended until the 31st of August. So what I will do is encourage community groups that were part of supporting our communities during that time to check the information on the NEMA website that they're eligible for the reimbursement. And if you did have any specific questions from your communities, I'm happy to help support you with those as well.
Very good, thank you for the ability. We have Mayor Dina followed by Mayor Luka.
Thank you. I'm glad you mentioned about the future of local government, and I was just wondering about again, another apparent misalignment between, within the reforms about future local government and now emergency management. Seen a bit of a misalignment in terms of water reform and resource management reform, and I just wondered if you had any insights into how that might play out, and whether the emergency management bill will have to be redone in just a few short years perhaps. Is that your expectation, or are you able to comment at all?
Yeah, thank you through the chair. I don't have specific comments relating to that, but what I can say is through the emergency management bill process and through the process that it's currently going through, there is conversation about how the learnings from different events, for example, should be incorporated into this process. And that's sitting with Parliament, but what I would do is encourage that through your own public submission processes to feedback any of your perspectives about what you would like to see the Emergency Management Act to look like. In terms of the local form, I don't have a specific comment, but I'm able to take your feedback and questions back to NEMA and see if we can provide a response.
I think the key point is there any future-proofing being contemplated in that regard? Because of the expectation, some expectation that local government reform take place, that there's future-proofing.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Thank you for that. I'll take that back and come back to you.
Mielika.
I haven't read the bill in any great detail, but I have a summary of it in front of me. I mean, fundamental in all emergency preparedness and response is your ability to fund it. The bill is silent on funding. I'm not sure that it should be, since it's actually a critical issue. It's not just the magnitude of funding, it's the speed at which it comes. I mean, so people who have been impacted by disaster, they don't need the money in 6 months, or I mean, we just saw that it's taken almost 6 months to liberate a miserable $100,000. Surely we should be feeding back that this is critical. I mean, it's a critical issue in the future for local government as well. It's all about funding. Without funding, you don't do anything. You can't be prepared. You can't set up food stores or water or anything like that. So I don't know, perhaps it's covered by another piece of legislation or something. And that really depends on your structures for liberating funding, whether or not you've got a sovereign fund or something to prepare a war chest for future emergencies, which we know will come. And so I think that's maybe it's another discussion completely, but I think it's quite critical.
Thank you, through the chair. I hear your comments, and I agree funding is an important part of response and recovery. I will say that if you have specific feedback, to put those through your public submissions. And what I can also say is that the Act itself is primary legislation. We do have different mechanisms that provide specific information about the different fundings that are available. And as part of the whole reform process, that information will be ideally made clearer. So I just want to make it to the point, if you have specific feedback or comments, to put those through your public submissions.
So this is a sort of umbrella legislation, and underneath that there will be other parts of it that might address funding. Is that what you're saying? And I mean, could you point me to that actually at some point?
Thank you through the chair. So this is the emergency management bill as a process, but we do currently have, as publicly available, things such as the National Set-In Plan and other information that talks about different fundings. So, for example, what I mentioned about the Cyclone Gabrielle Welfare Grant is available, publicly available on our website.
Thank you for that, Advisor Fault. I might say, Mark, Acting Director Crow, that there is a piece of work to reflect some of the comments that we have as part of a wider submission, and I am leaning and looking towards the team to capture that key point on behalf of the committee. That's it. Thank you. Thank you for that, Advisor Fault. Wonderful to have you here with us here today. Can I call please for a mover to receive the update? Both the narrative and the verbal report, moved by Mia Dino and seconded by the Premier Kai Fong. All those in favour, please signal aye. Those who are against, the item is carried. Thank you. We now have agenda item 7.8, a presentation of the tsunami research trip to Japan. Can I invite please Liz Oliver, our Advisor Emergency Management, Tauranga City Council, and welcome back to the presentation table, Joe Linsky, a Senior Emergency Management Advisor for the Western Bay of Plenty District Council. Welcome, Paula. We're in your hands, thank you.
Good morning, thank you. I'm Jo Linsky and we have Liz with us. Excuse me. We were very fortunate to have received scholarships to attend Japanese tsunami research trip. So we are going to try and capture what we took in over a 7-8 day period. And we are more than happy to answer any questions at the end of the presentation that you may have. We do find that it does tend to invite a few discussions, so we'd be more than happy to take those. So Friday, March 11th, 2011, Japan suffered a magnitude 9 earthquake. Japan's not unaccustomed to large earthquakes, and the previous largest one was back in 1960 when they had the Chilean earthquake, which actually caused a tsunami. So there's a lot of history in Japan with regards to earthquakes, and they have statues throughout the country that have different markings on them with different magnitude earthquakes and the result of those in tsunamis. Shaking was felt pretty significantly with this particular earthquake, and it was the aftershocks that they actually had as well. So while you have a 9 magnitude earthquake, you can have multiple magnitude 7 and above aftershocks. So we're going to talk through a little bit about what we experienced while we were there and some of the key learnings that we took away. Sorry, I went too fast.
So yeah, the secondary event following the earthquake was the tsunami, and this is probably the images that people are most aware of on this day. The first tsunami issue was first tsunami warning was issued 3 minutes after the earthquake, which is incredibly fast. We will talk through shortly sort of the negative impacts that came from some of the messages that went out to the public, but it kind of builds sort of a timeline image there. First waves reached the coast approximately 30 minutes after the earthquake. So when we look at our Bay Plenty coastline, we know it would be about 40 to 50 minutes, so relatively similar timing. And the tsunami itself resulted in over 20,000 deaths and the loss of 450,000 homes. In the event, including the earthquake and the tsunami, 97% of deaths were directly from the tsunami and drowning, showed the criticality of actually evacuating in time.
Because tsunamis and earthquakes weren't uncommon in Japan, and because they had some pretty devastating tsunamis, there were a lot of countermeasures that were put in place. They mostly focused on previous events. So they were looking at infrastructure based on the certain wave height that they had predicted from history. A lot of the sea walls and the coastal dikes that were put in place were based on a 3 to 6 metre wave. And yes, we'll move forward as to seeing exactly why you can't always predict Mother Nature.
So these are some of the messages that were given out to the public on the day, and it really helps paint a picture that influences people's decisions on the ground. So a magnitude 7.9 earthquake was observed at 2:49 p.m. So this is a school day, kids are finishing up, parents are at work. They issued tsunami information very quickly, so 3 minutes. They said 3 metre waves in Iwate and Fukushima and 6 metres in Miyagi. So then looking back on those countermeasures we just talked about, there were already breakwaters and seawalls up to 10 metres around the place. So a lot of people who actually felt the natural signals and started to evacuate saw these messages, and some people actually started to return back into the area thinking that their defence forces would be sufficient. 3:14 p.m, so 28 minutes following the earthquake, they observed that there was a rapid rise of offshore tsunami heights, and they got revised information. So 6 metre waves now, and over 10 metre waves in Miyagi. once again, some areas still thinking that maybe they will be safe, but starting to feel unease and people starting to evacuate again. 3:30 p.m, so this is 44 minutes following the earthquake. The waves are now onshore, impacting areas. Tide gauges everywhere completely scaled out, and the revised information is it's over 10 metres in all areas and completely overtopping their existing structures. So it's important showing that that information, not being correct at the time, how much that influenced people's decisions. Those who reacted to the natural warnings, as we always advise, and didn't avoid the messages, but continued to stay out of the zones, remain safe. Those that relied directly on the information may have lost their lives.
So we focused on 3 key areas of learning. The first one is something that all of the staff in this room are aware of, which is the importance of planning. The second is that resilience is strengthened when it is shared. And the third is that resilience is an iterative process.
So we're going to touch on a few key examples. There were many that we learned over there in 7 to 8 days, but for the sake of timing, we'll just focus on a couple today. One is sort of an operative plan that they had in place that was quite interesting. So after the earthquake, rescue helicopters were deployed straight away. So they knew that there was significant damage already happening. They put them up into the air and actually recorded incoming damage to the earthquake. This has actually turned out to be quite key information because one of the major gaps at the start was information gathering. I know there's been massive impacts, but actually getting the intelligence is really difficult. This information that they had from those visuals helped them to then secure rescue and relief routes and prioritisations.
So one of the specific projects that we did look at was called Project Home. So before the tsunami and earthquake, there was significant planning in Japan for an event of this magnitude. They had pre-identified key critical routes for both rescue, recovery, relief prior to the event. What that did mean is that they were actually able to open up pretty quickly significant routes to be able to get rescue and relief into those areas. So we actually identified quite closely on this with State Highway 2 that runs up our coast. So we know that we have a lot of communities that are off that state highway. So for us to come back and having seen how they operated over there, it's really important for Listener to make sure that our local councils that are sitting along State Highway 2 are actually looking at the importance of that critical routes and pre-identifying some of those isolated communities that would be there if we weren't able to get into them. And I think everyone in this room has got communities that would be potentially isolated if State Highway 2 was not.
And another example is the airport. So this was pre-identified as a critical area to have operative as quick as possible. It was flooded at 4:02 p.m. on March 11th. And by March 15th, debris clearance works on 1,500 metres of runway was completed and the operation of helicopters had begun. It sounds like a bit of time, but when you see the amount of damage and waste that was in that area, it was a significant feat to get done that quickly. It's pretty impressive, and by March 16th, it was open for limited traffic of relief planes. So this was one of the most critical areas to get up and running.
Another aspect of planning is with regards to the Ministry of Education. So we spent a bit of time with the chair of the Board of Education in one of the provinces, and we also got to visit quite a few schools that had been damaged in the earthquake and following the tsunami. In one area in particular, there was 78 students who were at the school on this particular day. 74 of those students were the casualties of fatalities. So actually only one student, other than at this particular school, lost their life in the tsunami. And remembering the earthquake happened at 2:46, so it was during school time. The reason why so many students were saved was because of the Ministry of Education plans that were in place. Now, it's worth noting that in New Zealand, we do have very good emergency plans within our schools. What is key, and it's very important for us as emergency management officers, is to ensure that those schools have plans that have been personalised. So this particular school, where 74 students' lives were lost, and only 4 actually survived, is because their plan was still in a generic format. They hadn't taken the time to read it and to personalise it. So when the event happened, they were 2 miles inland. So first of all, they thought they were far enough inland that maybe the impact wouldn't be as great. And when the students started to evacuate and to gather where they are supposed to gather, there was discussion between senior management at the school as to what action they should take. Some felt they should evacuate to the hill, which, as you can see, is incredibly close to the school. It took us less than a minute to walk to the hill. The principal, however, had pulled out the plan and was reading through it while all the kids were in a lovely little straight line, ready to evacuate, and decided to head towards the bridge. What the bridge actually did was act as a dam. And so all of the debris coming down and all of the sludge coming from the hills just caused even more devastation. So what should have happened is, in that plan, it should have said, in the event of a tsunami, we will evacuate to the hill, this is the route we're going to take. What it actually said is evacuate to vacant land, which meant nothing to the teachers. They were, does that mean the park? Does that mean the bridge? Where does that mean? So when we looked at how we work with our schools, we all have schools that are in the tsunami evacuation zone. The first thing that we've come back and said, how robust are your plans and how clear are they? And then how clear have you managed to communicate that to the school community, to their whānau, to local businesses and to your neighbours who may be able to help you during the evacuation.
So the next aspect that we're going to look at is the importance of sharing information. So resilience is strengthened when it is shared. One thing that the country did, this has been the most costly disaster to ever occur, they put a recovery tax at the national level. This was then fed into by local planning and knowledge. So each area was given a certain amount of money and they had to put in their own local planning, recovery, and report on how they were progressing, how they were going to achieve that within a 10-year timeline. We'll go through examples shortly of different approaches that were taken for this. Another aspect that they talked about was learning that they had that's actually been adopted widely, so it's similar to how we operate here. So that when it first occurred, each response agency wanted to jump in and work straight away, as you can imagine, got on the ground and started doing the work. However, they weren't talking to each other clearly, so there was a lot of isolation going on. That was identified pretty quickly as a key weakness in the response. So liaisons were then dispatched sites and they worked as coordinators for the responses, such as our CEM groups. They worked with various response agencies and started to feed in the knowledge from what the communities would be needing, such as our recovery managers. So it was interesting to see the key learnings they had found and how that was already being adopted here.
Yes, another point to note is that local governments actually developed their own recovery and reconstruction plans. So while the government had collected their recovery tax, they were very aware that every community is different. So the local governments were actually given quite a bit of, power and authority to decide where that money was going to go and how that was going to be distributed. We've got 2 different approaches that we'll talk about shortly about how 2 different local government and 2 different townships chose to work their recovery.
So this example here is Waiwhanato City. They were greatly impacted. As you can see, it's in a bay town. You can kind of picture you've got the low-lying area down the base there in high hills. The water funneled right through there. There's a river that also runs through the centre. So it's quite easy to picture from that image how it would flow through that town. Before it happened, downtown was highly populated, and they had a very high number of elderly community who were unable to get up to the hills in time. So there's a significant number of lives lost in this area. They went for an approach of rezoning the town. So the downtown area is no longer residential. Instead, it is focused on commercial restaurants and actually quite interestingly hotels, so we were staying right down there, which is quite interesting. But then up on the hillsides, where you get higher up, is where the residents lived. So the elderly were in different communities up on the hillsides, the schools were there, and they also did their own planning in place. So one school we visited had created stairs with gates that led from their school to another school that was even higher on the hill, and they practiced regularly walking between the two schools. So they went for more of a not a hard structure approach, but instead, let's move people out of these key areas.
At the opposite end of the spectrum was Rakusa Jakarta, who lost 8% of their population in the tsunami. They went very hard with their rebuild. They have zoned absolutely no residential or commercial property in the area that was destroyed in the tsunami. They've also built a seawall around the entire bay and planted forestry in front of that, so pine forest in front of the seawall. And there is a video, and I'm hoping it might play, if not, it will definitely play in the slides that we can see after. Oh, there you go. So as you can see, this bay, you can no longer see it from anywhere where there used to be people living and a lot of social housing. So it has all just been blocked off completely. And as the camera pans around a little bit more, you'll see a whole lot of brown land where nothing has been rebuilt. And they've increased the size of the levee that's in place there. That one building that you can see is the Tsunami Memorial Museum. And otherwise there's nothing else. They've completely done a managed retreat of the entire town. Everyone has gone back 2.5 kilometres inland, and they have rebuilt up towards the hills. So they took a very different approach to Waiwhanato City, where they were not even going to remotely consider the kind of devastation that they have experienced.
This is the same area, just looking from another aspect. On the left-hand image there, you can see a building in the distance. We do show another image of it in a bit. That building there was impacted up to 14 metres by water. That seawall that we just showed you that was standing at the top was a 14-metre high seawall, to get a bit of perspective on the height of that, so it's a significant structure. That right-hand image there is at the edge of the wall, so you can kind of see the wall right and left of the image. This is where the floodgates are, so these sort of structures existed previously with their sort of 6 to 10 metre walls that were already existent. They, however, were not automated, so a lot of people, some workers lost their lives because in these areas they had to physically go back in and press buttons and operate them manually, get them to close at the time. These ones are now automated, so you can see there they're up, but in a situation where there's a warning, they can, in my understanding, press a button from a distance, they will close and fill in that wall to carry on that structure. So a significant amount of money poured into these.
So seawalls have been built all around the coast and at a higher level than what they were before. Things like highways have been built up, so they are now 10 metres higher than they would have been previously. Interesting, they used a lot of the debris to actually pack the base of a lot of the highways that they built up. So if we consider the Paengaroa to Tauranga State Highway 2, for example, that was built after the tsunami, and yet was built in low-lying inundation areas, Japan would never have considered that. They saw what happened the first time around and said, we're not doing it again. They moved it further inland, they built it up, and they've actually also made it an evacuation route. So every 100 metres or so along the highway, you'll see stairs, and that means people in those lower lying areas can get safely to the stairs, up the stairs, up onto the highway. And all along the highway, you'll see signage that talks about it's an evacuation route. So if you are driving on the highway and there has been a disaster, drivers are aware that there will be pedestrians standing up there. Farmland is still in the low-lying areas, but they've really limited a lot of the residential zoning.
And then our final aspect is that resilience is an iterative process. So as we know, it's not one done, it's continuous improvement and learning. Many adaptations were made to their policy and regulatory frameworks after the Great Eastern Japan earthquake, as we've kind of touched on, the different areas taking different approaches that would represent and work best for their communities. One thing that really stuck out to both of us there was their real keenness to share their learnings, the good and the bad. They don't want to see these sort of things happening in other areas when lessons being learned already, and they were very open to telling us what didn't work. We went into the Tsunami Memorial Museum. Unfortunately, we weren't allowed to take photos, but there was a large board, probably almost the length of this room, that just went through everything that didn't work and solutions that they came up with on the ground. Would have been a fantastic thing to be able to take photos of, but it was really their openness to say these things didn't work, but this is how we're going to improve. It was pretty inspiring.
In particular, tsunami sirens, which we know is a hot topic in the Bay of Plenty. A tsunami siren is of no use to anyone when your entire cell network is down and your power is down. And some of these towns didn't have power for 4 or 5 months. The transport was an issue, power was an issue, communication was an issue, and so having things pre-planned in advance and knowing what you would do in those instances was critical. And we'll just finish on a couple of images. Throughout the northeast of Japan, where the tsunami occurred, there are buildings like this. There are 2 parts of the community. One aspect is they don't like seeing them, it's a constant reminder and re-traumatising what they experienced. The other aspect is they should be preserved as reminders. So the shopping centre on the left, you'll see 3/4 of the way up, there's like a little brown strip on the left-hand side of that image, and it actually has the wave height of 14.5 metres. And that was a good 1.5 kilometres inland. So people can physically see it and go, okay, well, we know that the wave was pretty high. On the right is a social housing complex, and the wave hit the top floor. And again, that is a good kilometre inland. So they have looked at their vulnerable community and made sure as part of their rebuild that they have built further back, they've made it safer, but they've kept these buildings there as a reminder for the future. Because it's very easy to become complacent. We know in our line of work, I do a lot of work in the community and we do talk about tsunamis. I try not to talk too much about the natural hazard because a tsunami to our locals in Wakatu or Waihi Beach, it'll never happen, it hasn't happened. Why are we talking about this? But if we start talking about the consequences, and how would you manage without power? How would you communicate with your whānau if we didn't have the cell network? How do you know where to let each other if something does happen? That actually becomes more real as opposed to talking about a tsunami. So while the the trip was amazing and what we learnt was incredible. It's more about how we rephrase a lot of what we learnt that can actually be useful to our communities.
Thanks, Eric. Now we go into discussion.
You look at.
I mean, from a thing like this, there are direct deaths and indirect deaths, and probably a quarter of the deaths actually were indirect. A lot were, I was thinking about this disaster, probably about more than 2,500 people who got evacuated from around the reactor areas died. You know, they're older people, probably, in temporary shelters and all the rest of the stuff. So I think it's what you know, in terms of shelter and accommodation after the event. They probably didn't make a good call to evacuate all those people anyway around the reactor zone. They probably didn't need to, but I mean, things are happening quickly, so I don't know how we'd respond to something like this. Where do people go when they get displaced by these sorts of events? And I guess that's all part of the preparedness. I mean, having halls, food stores, I guess we're not ready.
Through the chair, thank you. That's exactly, you're right. We are on the road to preparedness, but if you were to talk about something as devastating as that, it's all very well to say, for me, for example, Waiheke Beach, we've got that sorted. We know where we're going to send them, we know how we're going to get them there. That's one aspect of a population that's 3,500 to 4,000 people. Then we talk about Tauranga, Papamoa and Mount Maunganui, where you've got 50,000 people. So, you know, while you might be able to look after Whakatane, you might have Marae, and we've got community-led centres, and I know that Justin does a fantastic job in that area. But when you look at the scale, we would be calling on a lot of our outside areas to help us. And while we know that we won't have enough venues, because we won't have enough venues for all of those people, that's where the conversations are happening with water, other areas further down inland where we can call on some assistance. So we know NEMA would be there to help us with additional resources. But the key message for us is you must look after yourself. You have to have a plan in place. In Japan, they use a phrase called Tendenko, which means look after yourself first. And because if you can look after yourself, that is one less person that the local government has to look after with the local community. But you're right, it is a bit of a beast of how much preparedness we need. We need them to preserve life in the first instance. We need to get them somewhere safe, whether that is State Highway 2 is a marker of you need to get there, and then we need to think about what happens then, because that's what the community are asking. What next? We can get there, but then what happens?
Thank you, Joe, very interesting presentation. I was intrigued by the elements of managed retreat. Some might say it's unmanaged retreat in this case, but so Whanatu and Takata decided to basically move their town, okay. How did that work in terms of compensating people, what money involved, the planning, all that stuff, which we face in our, perhaps over the next 100 years rather than over the, they did us in just a handful of years, I suppose. So how did they cope with that? What mechanisms do we need?
Through the chair, James, that is right. It was a very difficult managed retreat from their zoning processes. I guess it was fed from their central government. So there was funding available so that's where they put all this funding into the local government and said, you choose what is right for your community. One thing that Whanatu in particular, they wanted to get communities together. So people that had lived in those low-lying areas as a community for generations didn't want to move to another city somewhere else, or didn't necessarily want one to live on one side of the bay, one on the other. So they actually worked together with the community to move suburbs, I guess you would call them, together. So rebuilding those suburbs together one at a time around Upton Hills. And the funding was from central government. And of course, people were happy to, not all of them, I would say 80% were happy to be moved because they had lived through the devastation. And I guess that's where it's difficult for New Zealand, because we might have one coastal strip that might need to be considering managed retreat, but the people 2 rows behind, they haven't lived the experience. So that's where it would be very difficult from a funding perspective to get the buy-in of the whole community, whereas in places like Whangato and Rivers and Jakarta, the whole community was behind it.
Do you feel the disaster changed their mindset?
100%.
So, because at the moment, I can imagine if you suggest this, tolerable, might get some.
We would be laughed all the way to Hamilton.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
With saying that as well, not all aspects were loved by the community, like those 14-metre seawalls were quite controversial amongst the community. That's a decision that was sort of made and not necessarily fully supported by community. We went in and had a fisherman who has a strong connection to the sea. He'd lost that connection. He could no longer see the ocean from his place. It used to take him 10 minutes to launch his boat. It was now a 40-minute drive around to get to the ocean. There was those sort of things that people lost their connection to the natural environment. So not everything was supported, but those sort of situations. He did lose his daughter on the day. We understand why they got in, but it was contentious.
Thank you, Commissioner Losley.
Thanks for the presentation, and certainly interesting in terms of some of the responses. And I've got 2 or 3 questions. In terms of the warnings, was that primarily through the mobile phone network, or was it sirens, or some other mechanism? And then, what's their primary warning system now?
On the day, a lot of their warnings were put out through sirens, noting that many sirens failed. They had, trying to remember the exact numbers, this may be slightly incorrect, I think it was around 35 different areas have sirens. In the 20s failed. They also put out information via radio stations, telecommunications that way. I don't believe mobile phones, the EMAs were operated back then. That's my understanding. They now have apps and EMAs similar to how we have here.
So just in terms of the failure of the sirens, was that presumably due to the initial earthquake in terms of what severing power connection?
Exactly.
In terms of the recovery and reconstruction plans, which I said were undertaken by local governments, were those mandated legislatively by the Japanese government? What was the framework or mandating for those plans?
And to be honest, we didn't get into too much of the detail around how that framework was set up. We were there for a pretty brief period of time. And while we did spend an afternoon with the City Hall in Whangato City and spoke to their recovery managers, our understanding is that the central government did hold the framework, but the actual reconstruction and planning of the particular areas and provinces were completely managed by the individual provinces. So the central government is really funding for them.
And last question, you mentioned in terms of the Ministry of Education had done painting in this space. Were there any particular sectors where there were gaps in the painting outside of the education
and not so much in any particular sector, it was more your local residents. So generally the sectors were very well prepared and planned. The commercial operators had business continuity plans similar to what we have here. In the event of an earthquake, this is what you do. In the event of a tsunami, this is what you do. It was more some of the residents and mainly the independent living older residents. And they were not really catered for from an evacuation route perspective. They were mobile and some of the areas were quite difficult, and they have addressed that in their rebuild. They've made sure they're in areas which are accessible, that are more higher land for the more vulnerable residents. So I guess the vulnerable residents would be the gap.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Kaifong. Then Meluka.
Thank you, Chair. I think you mentioned that it took 5 months to get power supply back on to some of the regions. And so it's just, what were some lessons that we could be using where you've got lengthy periods of time where obviously going to be without power and without cell phone communications and things like that. And I think that's also been a problem that has happened recently here after Cyclone Gabrielle. So were there any learnings out of that about how you could quickly make the power supply or the communications come back on stream more quickly?
I think Cyclone Gabrielle's actually taught us quite a bit in that area, and we are very fortunate in New Zealand to have access to Starlinks now, for example, for communication. It is something that each individual council is planning. When you're planning for your welfare centres and the location of those welfare centres, what actually do you have there? Do you have the ability to put generators in? Do you have generators within your community that you have pre-identified and that you know how you're going to get them from A to B, bearing in mind that your road network could be destroyed? So they're things that individually our local TAs are all talking about now, is we can pre-identify a lot of things that we know we would need. We know we need communications, that is number one. We know we're going to need access to power. We know we're going to need access to buildings. There were some people living in welfare centres for 4 months. Although the Japanese do things incredibly quickly. I mean, their highway was built within a matter of weeks, and they had built these prefab containers. We did ask them if maybe they could come and help us with Mayfair around that. Yeah, I mean, they had prefab container houses that were erected within days to weeks. They had pre-identified land of where these were going to go, knowing they would be temporary until they had worked out their planning. They're things that our councils can do now. We can start that planning process, plan for the worst, hope for the best, and have the land that we know we're going to be using, know where we're getting our generators, knowing how we're going to access our Starlinks, not waiting for them to arrive in the box and realising we need Wi-Fi to actually connect to them. All of those things we can do now.
Thank you, Mayor Luca.
I mean, I guess the power issues in that region were quite severe. I mean, 5 nuclear plants were taken offline. New Zealand's entire generation capacity was lost in one hit. But I'm wondering about the financing of their recovery, because what did they do? I mean, did they print money? I mean, what was the mechanism? Because they had to find huge amounts of money to do what they needed to do.
Billions.
Yes, I know, but where did the billions come from? What did they do that wasn't business as usual? Did they just print money? Did they take on massive debts? What mechanisms? What can we learn from the money generation aspect of this disaster?
I guess again, we didn't go into too much of that central government conversations because we were working a lot more locally with some of the local councils. They did talk about the amount of debt incurred and the implementation of the recovery tax. And remember, the population of Japan and as a whole country is significantly higher than our country. So a recovery tax from their taxpayers has gone towards paying off that debt, but also starting a reserve for the future. New Zealand would not be in that position.
No, actually, I guess Christchurch disaster proportionately probably just as bad or worse, maybe. Thanks.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Innick. Then Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much, ladies. What a great presentation and a memorable experience for yourselves. And we're lucky to have had, received this information through your eyes. The couple of questions I did have were already asked by Deputy Mayor Thunderfong and the Commissioner. It was really all about the warning systems and sirens and the other sort of learning. So that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Chair. Oh dear, what a wake-up call. 10 years down the track, I've just about forgotten about all of this stuff, and complacency is our biggest enemy. We'll all go home from here today and go back to our homes, and I'm just wondering how many of us will be thinking very, very seriously about what we've seen today here. Some of the lessons that we've learned, particularly with the tsunami, and that was the last one that we had a bit of a fright here. I can see that we've buried that and we've gone away and forgotten about it. What Mayor Luca just said, we saw that in Whakatane. Leslie is aware of this. There's nowhere for our people to go. Put them up on a hill if they're young enough to climb that hill. And all the poor old truckers that get left behind. Literally, you do that, and it was chaotic in Whakatane. I know, and some friends of mine live in Kapamaoa. They drove to the end of their street, and that was it. They turned around and they drove back home and sat there waiting for the wave to come. That's how bad it was. It's just crazy, and I think this is the big wake-up call for governance and local authorities now is going to be talking about spatial planning, and that's going to be a real brave discussion. Thank you very much for that. And as I say, it's 10 years down the track and you get so complacent. Victor talked about Christchurch. I visit Christchurch regularly. Christchurch is a bloody bomb zone. It's sort of trying to pick up the pieces, and that's 10 years ago too, or more. And then we tried to build a church here for the last decades, to build a whole road, and that is unbelievable, and that's what we're up against. So yeah, thank you very much. Much appreciated. Okay, thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Mayor Luca.
Just a general comment. I mean, there are fast disasters and slow disasters, and in 2020 we declared a climate emergency in this country. And I guess a lot of us here are pretty frustrated about, okay, we've got this climate emergency which is playing out slowly, and there's always this issue with funds. I mean, how do we respond? We talk about responding, but in reality, there's never any money to respond because we're busy just doing the basic stuff. So let's not forget that climate change is an emergency that's ongoing at the moment. It doesn't just appear from one day to the next. We're in it. So we should be responding now, that's my point. The response should be in full swing, and to some extent it is, but at local level, we don't feel it. We don't feel the financial assistance that we should be getting. Probably not out of scope for this forum, or maybe not.
Thank you, Mayor Luca. Thank you, ladies. Liz Oliver from Tauranga City Council and Joe Linsky from Western Bay District Council. A lot to think about. We thank you for sharing a couple of key takeaways. When events occur quickly, and you're a part of a wider network of partners holding hands to behave and respond in a siloed way is incredibly unhelpful. I think I caught that in the presentation. Perhaps while there were some similarities for our Bay of Plenty region, there's also some very clear differences, such as the ability to just make decisions and our current structure of consultation, which often takes time. And it does not move as quickly, perhaps, as what the response requires. Now, you've perhaps raised an idea for us to think about in terms of reframing the readiness as part of our 4 Rs to respond, so that there is an action behind it. Response keeping that kind of light, I think I read that. And advisor folds, I think it might be, it's not being missed in the conversation that in Japan, while they do things very differently, there was definitely a resourcing funding mechanism facilitated, created, enabled by central government in Japan. We're not by any means claiming that that was part of the success as well. While we understand that, like local government, central government does have responsibilities, the resourcing that Mea Luka reminds us of at every meeting is a big part of that conversation and can either enable or inhibit our ability to look after our people. So we thank you both for your presentation. Maybe we can share that with advisor folds to take back to let them know that this is what the Bay of Plenty are considering, and we're very lucky to have that experience and advice here in the Bay of Plenty. Thank you, ladies. Can I call for, please, a mover to receive the presentation? I have moved by Deputy Mayor Koh Whang, seconded by Commissioner Worsley. Those in favour, please signal aye. Aye. Those against, the item is carried. Thank you. Thank you, ladies. And moving on, please, to agenda 7.9 under separate cover. There we go. Miranda, can I just check on Zoom? Do our Zoom participants have the separate cover? Can I just check, please, Deputy Mayor Immings, you do have the separate cover email. His Worship, I've got a thumbs up from His Worship Mayor Moore. Good. Mr. Crowe, Acting Director, we're in your hands. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The last item for me today pertains to a change in a local recovery manager appointment for Western Bay of Plenty. Having recently received a resignation from Anita Brown, Western Bay is looking to replace her position on the roster and have processed this up through their own organisation and through the KEG as a out of meeting cycle item in the last week or so. The nomination to go forward is for Rod Barnett. Who's the recommendation?
Recommendation moved by Councillor Campbell. Do I have a seconder? Mr. George, Chair of the KEG.
Sorry, just
before we do it, lightning speed, Councillor Campbell.
Chair, my apologies, I thought we already presented things earlier.
Acknowledge, we'll do that. Thank you.
Thank you. With accuracy, Councillor Campbell, if you're happy to move the recommendation, so moved by Councillor Campbell with that amendment. Do I have a seconder? Mayor Denia, those in favour, please signal aye. Aye. Those against? The item 7.9 is carried.
I apologise for that, Chair. I just can't keep up with all these officers. They come and go. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Can I just signal we've come to the end of our agenda? The date of our next meeting is Friday, the 29th of September 2023, and I believe that Acting Director Crowe has signalled there will be some annual change presented at our next meeting, and the annual report that will come to us then. Whānau, thank you all for your participation. To our staff, thank you all very much for your presentations and for informing us. Help us to be able to look after our people when things happen in the Bay of Plenty, and our people know what to do, where to go, and they'll be well looked after. Advisor Stace Tahiri, can I invite you please to come and close our hui today? Okay, speak to you.
Hi, me too. Kia ora. Mia no tātou. Ka whakaari e te tapu ki a wāti Aotearoa. We now lift the formality of our kōrero. Kia tūruki whakataha ai, kia tūruki whakataha ai. so the pathway is clear to return to our everyday activities. Homi, Ui, Aye.
Aye, Chair, I declare our meeting closed, Miranda, at 11:45 a.m. Thank you.